And this first question I will ask you. This is probably a more personal question coming from me, but I'm just curious. How does someone become a lead game designer for any video game? What's your professional background?
Let's see. I mean, do you want the long story or the short story of at least my experience to this role?
We've got the time. We'll take the long version.
Okay. God, if I were to roll back in time, 1998, man. This is back when I was in junior high. That was my first foray in just getting some interest into the game design world. I was on the Windows 98. We got I picked up some software. It was Game Maker and I think Games Factory. I don't know. I was just tooling around with these things. And I just had fun creating like some dinky little objectives and challenges that my siblings would play. But in any case, going through high school, there was never anything, no curriculum, courses, or career advancement to point you in any sort of direction of any sort of like game development and design, right? That's never been a thing back in like the early 2000s. But I've always more or less been a visual and very creative individual. I was good at math, but it wasn't something I wanted to truly pursue, like going into any sort of programming or computer science. And it wasn't until my college years, and we're talking about like between 2004 to 08, did I come across a school in the Chicagoland area. It was the Illinois Institute of Art that started make advertising. Hey, become a game designer, or do you want to come in for animations and do 3D modeling or things like that? I'm like, that sounds really cool and like very unheard of to me. And I realized, wow, maybe this is this step in the door of like getting more involved with game developments, right? So I switched colleges about 2007. I joined the AI. That's the abbreviation that we use for Illinois Institute of Art. Went through their game. What was it? Game art and design. That was the actual degree that we were working toward there. The staff and faculty was great. The school, I won't comment too much on their practices, but needless to say, loans were a bit harsh. But coming out of it, I got my first go in 2010 into the industry with the studio NetherRealms, the company behind Mortal Kombat.
Okay, yeah.
I was fortunate to meet, well, I shouldn't say meet, a friend of mine, a childhood friend rather. He also went into game programming through, he went to Northern University, and I think, oh, that's right, then he transferred to DePaul. But yes, he got picked up at NetherRealms as a junior programmer. And I guess they were looking for a localization data, God, my mind is blanking. Not a data analyst, but just data input.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, take me. Like, this sounds like a big opportunity. Just having WB and like a NetherRealm label on my resume would be very nice to have. So I worked with them for 2 years. As an intern, they can only contract you out for like 9 months at a time before they're, based on just employment practices here in the U.S. If you're like working over 9 months, you have to give like benefits and insurance, et cetera.
Okay.
That's common practice.
Yeah.
And while I myself as an intern didn't like it because I wanted to be able to stick around with the company and grow, but I kind of understood, and it was just a really good opportunity to be in the industry, meet the people, and just have a starting point, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From there, after I departed NetherRealms, I kind of started some indie work, doing some mobile game stuff and other contract 3D art modeling. That was more or less my background at the time. Less about the actual design end of things, but actual 3D modeling, creation of environments, assets, whatnot. But I did come to kind of a term that I hit a ceiling of my own skill set, that to become a 3D artist, it is a very involved, and you have to be on top of it day in and day out. It's like whether you're working and then coming home, you got to get back on the computer and pick up such a plethora of skill sets across so many different softwares. It was maddening, to say the least. And props to all those individuals that can really keep up with it. But I mean, it was at least important and insightful for myself to realize, maybe 3D art isn't my direction, and the way for me to, find a foot within the industry. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get more into the design end of things, and I started working on just my own end of personal projects and having fun, working in Unreal, working in Unity. Those are game engines. I'm sure that's not too unfamiliar with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, just tooling around and having fun. Level design being much more of a thing that, I really enjoy creating worlds, giving people objectives, and once again, just having friends and family, just I guess play test things and tell me where I went wrong and how can I improve, etc. Right?
So you're a real artist at heart, then, essentially.
Real artist at heart.
Creative.
Yes. Yeah. I can go into detail on I guess some of our maps a little bit later into the podcast, mm-hmm. as I get to the WG era of my I guess advanced career advancements. But I actually started at Wargaming in 2013. I'm going on almost 9 years here. So just a couple months before we actually launched World of Tanks onto the 360, I started with QA. I just wanted to, get almost like a second try of foot in the door back in the industry. Heard about this Wargaming being new in the Chicago area. It was actually really nice because instead of coming from a artist perspective where coming from a data entry, and I did actually help with some art assets back at NetherRealms. I forgot to mention that. But going back to WG, when I came to this studio, it was very nice to kind of start things from the ground up in terms of being with the QA departments. I got to see all the processes of the different departments, get to know everyone really well of the various departments. And that really helped me kind of grow and be very integrated well with the studio as a whole. Not to mention, our culture is amazing. I would very much admit that a lot of my close coworkers have become also close friends of mine, and we would regularly hang out after work hours, and that's something I realized was very important to me. But yeah, I stuck with QA for maybe 2.5 years. And again, the pay wasn't the greatest thing, but it was a stable job. And like I said, the people were great. So I was very happy to kind of be around with them. But then I did get the opportunity to join the events team, in which they handle much of the ops, the seasons, the selling of the bundles, and the structure of how that is all kind of presented and set up to the game. So I worked with them for, I think, another additional 2 years. And then we finally had when Wargaming came up with the Mercenaries and the War Stories feature put into the game, we wanted to grow our level design department. We needed more people to work on the missions that were tied to War Stories. So there was an internal hiring position open for a junior level designer. And I just leapt at it. I'm I have to go for it. This is kind of a dream opportunity. I wasn't sure if I'd ever make it to design with Wargaming, but I leapt at it. And sure enough, I got the job, and started working on maps, started working on some more of when I got on, I was working on the later end of the last War Story missions. The Runaway Tiger, that's what that one was called.
Yes. Yep.
Then about a year into that role, our senior level designer, he ended up moving on to another game and team. Kudos to him. He wanted to make a big change. He's been with the studio for about 4 or 5 years himself at that point. Just wanted, no different than any other employee. Sometimes they stick around for a year or quite a few years. They decide other opportunities and other games might take their interest. So at that point, I was the only level designer. and kind of held the. Also, at that time, we were starting to spin up a lot of the Cold War maps, like Desfall and Kalbong and the other two. So those all kind of landed in my lap, and I was very quick to just kind of take ownership and run the level design spectrum of all things for the design departments. And that's when I got boosted up into just, promoted from junior into just level designer. And then, from there, I was level design for a while, moved up to a lead level design position because we expanded to 2 more level designers on the team as we wanted to work on more maps, etc. And then just do one last follow-up, because now I'm finally to the final step of how I got into the lead position was Chuji. He got promoted into the design director of the studio just last February, I believe it was, or January.
Okay.
Because he was overseeing multiple projects that we were also working on here at the company. Still being very, keeping his hands into the World of Tanks team and development cycle as there. He's always been kind of a mentor and helped me in terms of like any sort of advice and information that I might need, as well as just being also very technical savvy. So when I hit my blockers, I look to him for that. But in any case, they needed a lead level designer, and he came to me with the role. It was intimidating. I will be very blunt and honest, but I didn't want to back down from an opportunity like this, and I knew it was going to be rough. The workload has absolutely changed on me from everything I was doing before. But it does give opportunity because we have our other level designer on the team. It gives him more leverage to, give his creative vision now and come and try his end of ideas into the maps and the future of level design in the game. And I more or less now just in the lead position run some meetings, make sure we're on task for a lot of our features, delegate tasks out as needed, or try to unblock my team wherever necessary. Okay. And sorry, that's the long story, I suppose, going from childhood to the present.
No, I appreciate you telling me that, because my professional background is engineering, so I come from a completely different, you could say, universe.
Okay.
So for me, it's been very insightful to understand your world of, which is more artistic, more creative, and no, I appreciate you telling me that, and it's interesting you've mentioned the level design, because I do have one bone to pick with you.
Oh boy, I'm sure you're not alone.
And several other people listening to this now will probably laugh because they know exactly what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Dragon Ridge. 90% of my deaths are to map topography. Is there any way we can fix that? So sometimes it's just like, I'm just cruising along in my 107, and I'll go off this little ridge here, and the next thing I know, bang. I think, oh jeez, this map's killed me again.
So okay. Funny story on Dragon Ridge. So as you and I both know, this was originally like a World War II map.
Yeah.
And back when we were still working on a huge effort to restore a lot of maps back into rotation, we had one of the other bigger initiatives was to also supply maps to the Cold War game mode, because that one was also hurting with a very small quantity of maps in rotation. Mm-hmm. So we put it upon ourselves to look at all the maps that were first larger in scale, that would benefit and play very well in the Cold War mode. Mm-hmm. And then second would also be, work. Let me back up. I worked on a whole stack rank of maps when we had to decide of pulling a lot of maps out for the 6.0 update. And then that same stack rank also listed the maps that would be returning in rotation. And that stack rank is based on, one, there was a poll that we sent to players like 2 years ago of like, what were the favorite maps? And then 2, which ones were like very well balanced. And then 3, which ones were like very varied in their kind of topology, seasonality, or just a unique gameplay feel about them. And so that stack rank is what we've been kind of working with for the past couple of years of determining our map release cadence. And then it did finally come to Dragon Ridge, which I do know and completely understand with the community that this map technically was not high on the list in terms of player favorites. But where it did favor well was for the Cold War mode. And it also fit in well with our kind of release of when we shipped out a lot of the China and Japan maps during, I forget what season that was. So it was kind of a no-brainer for in that sense. Now, to get back to your concern, and yes, the topology issue, we did see this in our internal playtest early on, and it was actually much worse than it is in the live environment. So, I mean, it should go without saying that a lot of the issues that, yes, are discovered by you and the whole community and players, there are so many more that, you know, our QA team, thank God for them. They are our guardians before we go live with much of our issues. So many other things that happen that we have to catch and, you know, quickly address the best that we can. Dragon Ridge especially, we're talking about Cold War mode. There was an adjustment to the gravity in Cold War mode. Yeah. It still feels like natural to an extent, but once some adjustments were made to it, suddenly Dragon Ridge felt that much more tolerable. Some of those berms and the like the rice paddy fields before, very easily, almost in any tank, you would take some massive damage. It was a disaster. Cal Bong was the same way too. I remember that being an issue. Now, how can we apply and improve this going forward? I mean, there is a lesson learned that, you know, maps with so much rolling topology like that is absolutely kind of a disaster. And it is things that, like, let's make sure we don't try to do this same setup for the next map that we consider. But in terms of revisiting Dragon Ridge, I'll be honest, I don't have an answer for you to give right now. It is something myself, I can talk with our level designer and see, you know, maybe this is a map we got to pull out of rotation, because it's not something as easy as making a whole big map change and then by the next milestone it's ready to go. Anytime that we plan to make like major map rearrangements or changes of some sort, we would need to pull it out of rotation, because during the work in progress stage of things, and any given milestone, it's usually not enough time for us to make a huge change before the next milestone release. So that would be my, I guess, next set of steps of how we can look at Dragon Ridge. It just would be pulled from rotation first, and then, I mean, honestly, we would probably do something similar to what we did with Hellfire Pass as a big elevation reduction change.
Yes, I mean, well, yeah, you say Hellfire Pass, that has changed a lot. And that, I will admit, that's one map that I still don't know how to play properly, because in my head, I know the World War II map is still there. I know how I used to play it pre 6.0, and I take my tank and I'm still trying to play the World War II area, because that's what I know, and it's just not working for me. It's not working for me at all, and that one's a little painful. I will admit. At first I thought, oh, this is a massive map, it'll be good for light tanks. But you don't have those massive lines of sight like you do on El Alamein.
Right.
It's one I'm still trying to get used to. I will be honest about that. Yeah.
What I can comment on that is, the map is still very much divided when you have the big hill ridge. Now, much more tolerable that we made it easier to climb up there, but it is certainly still, you know, a sightline blocker in that regards. And it really does divvy up the team, where, you know, one whole front that you're trying to defend could easily fall when your whole team is going up another route. There's just so many different directions to go in a map of that size, right?
Yeah. Okay. When you're designing a map, I mean, I'll back up a little bit. just to provide context here, I was playing World of Warships a week or two ago, and I loaded into one game. I can't remember what the map was called. I don't know the game well enough, but I looked at the mini map and I realised the north side is basically a mirror image of the south, and I thought that was that struck me as sort of, well, that's a bit unnatural, because I always thought, you look at El Alamein or Hellfire Pass or any of these maps that we have in tanks, they're believable, If there's a highway running through, you can see it carry on through the map boundary, and you think, okay, this is a small section of the world somewhere. Obviously, you don't have this mirroring mindset that I've seen happen in World of Warships, which is, I appreciate that. But what is if you have a blank sheet of paper and your task is, we need a new map, where do you start? Is it like a look through the history books at historical battles, look at Google Earth to find real topography, and then generate from there, or is it all just from your head?
It's a little bit of all the above, like you just kind of pointed out. Sometimes if there is, a very historical landmark location, we would typically look into like Google Maps, find that location, and almost like just mash different areas around that location together to make it feel realistic and topographically like realistic as well. I don't always like to go that direction because sometimes it does pull away from some of the creativity. The very pen and paper direction I like to take is I like to think of a map as just what single letter in the alphabet or a single number. If you were to take that shape and understand that is the kind of the gameplay routes that players would take, where are the conflict points, and how do you build a map around that? So a good case in point, I bring this example up to the level designers in the past. Like, if we were to design a map that was like the letter A, and the spawn locations are at the base legs of the letter, so then your biggest contestment points is going to be at the middle, where there's kind of a lane to go through there, or the corner at the very top. A good map to kind of compare this, that's already in the live game, is like El Haluf, which is also kind of like a C shape, or like a U shape better as well. Yep. But you see where there's like avenues that players go this direction, open sight lines, and very important contest points that you need to control in order to win the map for the most part. Those are some of the more, like, I'll consider it like a linear map design, where you have very strong fronts that you desire players to go in order for success. And then there's also kind of the open-end approach, where you have a map that's very open, and you kind of place in where you want there to be contention points up along like a full like grid line from north to south.
Yeah.
Vineyards or Prohorovka is a good example of that. And then like those by example. Vineyards, perfect example, actually. That was our first ever community map.
Yes.
Where it was kind of pitched to players in the forums, what would they like to see? And it was a very successful one in my mind, because working with the community really helped narrow down like what is it players want to see, and what is telling to good gameplay that favors all kinds of tank types, right?
Yes, that's a very, I think that's a very valuable point you just made there. Maps that suit all tank types. And you've mentioned Vineyards as well. For me, Vineyards is one of my favourite maps. El Alamein is my favourite.
Oh, nice.
But Vineyards is also very nice. And if I were to explain why, I think my answer would be, firstly, you've got a very realistic looking environment. You've got a map that's adaptable for any vehicle type. And that second point, I think that is what makes or breaks a map, in my opinion, because I find that if I load into vineyards in a heavy, I know I can do well. If I load into vineyards in a light tank, I know I can do well. I mean, I've had games where I've had 10,000 spotting assist on on vineyards. I mean, I love it. It's brilliant. And the same for El Alamein. But then there are other maps where, and this becomes very, very noticeable to me when I'm trying to work my marks. If I load into El Alamein in a light tank, I'm thinking, the output, the end of the result of this game is down to me 100%. But if I load into a map like Mannheim, straight away I'm thinking, well, not much I can really do here. And that, I guess, the enjoyment I get from playing vineyards is higher. I've got more enjoyment from playing vineyards because I know it doesn't matter what tank I choose, I can still play in an environment that is conducive to every vehicle type.
Right, and you can always find yourself being very effective no matter what.
Yeah. And when I don't have control over the map, that's where the frustration comes in. And I suppose this is where World of Tanks is different, because another game that I've played a lot of, and I've talked about this on my channel as well, is I've played a lot of Battlefield 4. I like the Battlefield games.
I am a huge Battlefield fan. Yeah. I will tell you that. Yeah. BF4 was, in my mind, the last good Battlefield.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you there. That's just, I was playing it. I played it today. I love it. But what's nice about that setup is if you load into if you load into Silk Road, you think to yourself, okay, I can adapt my my recon class for this map.
Yeah.
And if you load into Operation Locker, you think, all right, I can adapt my medic class and I'll take a shotgun. Whereas in tanks, it's, all right, I'm going to take my Challenger 2. Oh, you've ended up on... I'll take Mannheim as another example, because the Stairs of Death really annoyed me on that map. Anyway, but I think you guys have fixed that. But there's that kind of... You pick your tank and then you roll the dice. Fingers crossed, will I get a good map? Will I get a good map? And I think I guess the point I'm trying to make is I don't know what's, from your side, I don't know what's unique about vineyards and El Alamein, but more of whatever that is, I'd love that.
You want more of that in other maps.
Yeah.
Vineyards was absolutely designed in mind. Like that one, I will tell you, I was very ingrained on the whole development of that one. El Alamein was my former senior level designer, who was my boss. He worked on that one. But yes, like vineyards, we would do a lot of play tests, as well as I go in just like a solo play test, not even have bots on or anything, and just put myself into many positions. Do I feel empowered? What can I see? What shouldn't I be able to see? And identify, does this feel good? Will I have fun in this? And so I kind of create this rubric for myself prior to any of the bigger internal tests that we do. And I try all these spots out. And if I find myself overly successful, or if I find myself, failing in certain areas, it's not always one-to-one to say, if I fail, this must be a bad spot. I must also understand that, other players and other people that are in the test will find other spots that I didn't consider. They're like, oh, well, hold on a second. This spot is not that good because that guy is over on the hill adjacent to me, and now I can't spot, I can't snipe from here. It's a good spot, but I am very much at disadvantage. But I got to step back and ask myself, is that okay? Because in other circumstances, it might work out just fine.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's. I don't want to jump around here. So the positive aspects of the map design. I can easily identify maps that I like. The maps that I dislike are probably more corridory.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the pet peeve for the majority, well, I would say those that are a bit more clued up about the Cold War mode, I think they would say the biggest pet peeve right now isn't the actual map. It's the play style that the map encourages that can be frustrating. The map that I have in mind is the one that I've forgotten the name of it now. It's got my name on the mini map. I should know this one.
Thiepval
Ridge. Yeah.
It's funny because I was the one that put your name in there, so for some reason I know.
Oh, well, I very much appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But what happens, and you've probably seen this, game starts and 4 or 5 tanks in your team drive up onto the little hill by the cap and they don't move for the whole game because it's true vision, and I assume folks think, oh, I can just sit here and snipe all the way across the map. Now, there are two sides to everything like this, where Wargaming is responsible for creating a map. Players are responsible for how they play it. But I suppose there is a fine balance between having an invisible wall somewhere so that a player can't get to that position, and then not having an invisible wall and saying, yes, you can play this area. Now, I would very much like it if the 2 specific hills I have in mind, I would like it if you couldn't sit on them, because then that would totally discourage people from playing the way they do. But then I'm assuming that you, as the designer, have made it that way for a very specific reason. And I know it's really, you probably had your fair share of this, where you hear, Wargaming, they've done this again, they've done that again, they've done this crap again, they've done, all of that kind of negative spiel. But I'm very aware that there is a balance, and there's going to be a reason from your side why certain areas have invisible walls and some areas don't. I would personally very much like it to be, if I look at something and I think I could get my tank up there, I can. If I look at something and think there's no way a tank's going up there, up a cliff face, for example, that's an area I'm not going to be playing.
Right. I can comment a little bit about that, and I agree. I agree with you and the players that don't like these invisible walls. And yes, I know these are still very much present in a number of the maps. What the breakdown is here is it was in fact specifically not meant to be like in an inaccessible area. So to that point, it should be more visually telling to the player as to, yes, indeed, it is not accessible. Our design process, when we make a map, we do a very rough layout, and in certain areas where we don't want players to be able to access it, we'll kind of put in placeholder rocks or blocks of some sort, where we say in our internal testing, we don't want you up here, or we've even deemed in testing that a spot has become too OP or something, so we ended up blocking it. So after, on the design end spectrum, when we are all done with our testing end and all the setup for all the level design, we then give the thumbs up and pass the map over to the artists, who then essentially beautify the map. They'll replace a lot of the trees, redo the lighting, change all the textures, etc. And then, like the areas we have blocked off, they'll put in a lot of like rock assets or build up like some cliff faces along them. Okay. That being said, from that point, when they wrap up their end of the art polish, it goes back into testing with us to kind of gauge and see how well the gameplay still feels and even looks with all the art changes and the visual changes. And we give feedback to the artists and others, etc. And to that end, we will often find some of these areas in which the artists already spent a great deal of time adding all these rocks, or they had a very specific vision to how a certain mound will look. And I know exactly what you're talking about on Thiepval Ridge, certain mounds that have been cut off. We were getting close to the wire there, and for a request to ask the artist to redo all the rocks and all the foliage around there would not be feasible, and we would get in kind of we'd have to have a lot of discussions of how can we actually achieve this. And the easiest answer is typically like, well, we can block it off with invisible walls for now. We can revisit this because there are certain paths that, yes, players will find a way to kind of wiggle their way up and get on top of this mound. Problem being, on some of these mounds that players will get up into, only very few select tanks would be like able to, like with certain speeds, get through this little gap or something. And then they have a very advantageous position there, or in other cases, this is where like a mode like Team Destruction becomes very problematic, where a player can roost themselves in a position like this, and it leaves the other team, if that's the last player left, and there's like maybe like 2 or 3 other guys on the other team, they may be unable to even reach this, and they got to go into a timeout draw to the end of the round. And that is something we really try to discourage and avoid in the game. Another example, Hellfire Pass again. Mm-hmm. We don't even allow team destruction in the random battle rotation to avoid like light tanks just kind of skirting the sides and avoiding any sort of spot or conflict. So that way, in contrast, when you have an objective base to capture, you can always draw the enemy to you if they choose to just try to hide from you.
Right, yes.
So yeah, back on the topic of the invisible walls, I am in complete agreement with you and the players. I would say it'd be better for visual representation, but sometimes it comes in late. And when I say late, I mean like we could be a week before like we ship like this map, and QA says, hey, we found a way up on this hill and you can see the whole map from here, and no one can get me. And we say, well, art is on another task. They don't have any bandwidth to give any adjustments to the terrain. So yes, we put in a wall in there. For that, please forgive me.
No,
but
it's understandable. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I do know that there's one particular individual in my Discord who has, I guess, made it their personal mission to find ways to climb up to places where you wouldn't be able to. And I think one of the things I saw him do was in the Griddle 15, he managed to climb on top of the center mountain in Lakeville.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so
even with the new art updated one,
maybe it's been a few months, but on his YouTube channel he's got how to climb up here, and I have looked at that and I thought that is cool. There's no way you'd be able to do that in a game because it took you 5 minutes, and
you'd be perfectly exposed.
Yeah, you'd be spotted and shot. But no, I like the sandbox sort of approach to map design, because I suppose it allows for player creativity. If I engage my mind and my brain and I'm playing, I think, I could make that play and outsmart them, rather than thinking, well, can't do that because there's an invisible wall there, so I can't do that. Right. Having as much freedom as a player to explore and try new things, I really, really like that approach, and maybe that's why I like El Alamein and Vineyards, because almost every
It's accessible throughout.
every square meter of that map is accessible. And I know the question has been raised several times. I've heard it raised just in conversation. And Hidden Village is a good example of this, where you've got the bottom left corner is just a massive mountain.
Yep.
And I've heard several people say, like, half the map isn't usable. And I guess that's my next question: is Hidden Village a, like you mentioned earlier, a letter or a number, or what was the thought process behind that map?
Well, this sounds uneducated, but Hidden Village actually came from the PC end of maps, did it not? I mean, mind you, that's something I should know, but I'm blanking at the moment.
Okay, well, no, it's that's okay. I mean, it's just one of those things where I thought, a lot of that map is inaccessible. If it's a PC one, then we might never know.
Much of our maps in the game we just adopt straight from PC, and we have started taking a bit of initiative of because PC, mind you, they have, I don't know how many level designers they have, but they can churn out maps much quicker than we do.
Yeah.
And they've been doing regular updates for much of the maps as well. And we do see these, and we look at them, and we try to identify ways of how can we adopt this for our game and apply these sort of changes. And I'm very much well aware of player requests that they want to see Ghost Town and Pilsen, some of the changes that were applied there from PC. How can we do it? And those are ticketed tasks that we are looking into. And this kind of falls under the same line that you and I just talked about, is to make those updates to the map, we'll have to pull it out of rotation, which is not the end of the world. We have a fairly healthy rotation now, so taking one or two maps out for an update to it in the near future would probably be worth it, and a good measure to provide to the players back. You said something I wanted to comment on. I guess back to the Hidden Village, and I just want to give my perspective of, yes, the whole half of the map is inaccessible. This was also something we had a discussion on design side. Like, do we want to carve into that mountain and make some mines or something, or a cave to get into? We have a lot of fun ideas, and we thought it would be really awesome to try something like it. It really boils down to our set of priorities and our tasks before us. The amount of effort it would take to change the map and put in that sort of stuff before the deadline of shipping the map, unfortunately just wouldn't meet the timeline that we were aiming for. But to that end, my perspective of it is that map, if I were to kind of gauge what WoT PC was doing when they came up with the map, they had a very specific vision in mind of, it's a corridor map to an extent, right? You got to cover essentially 3 fronts, but the fronts on the east side there's a lot more crossover opportunity than going through the mountain range. But the map is still technically large. It's still a 1 by 1 kilometer.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. If you could take out all the negative space of unplayable space and just kind of clump all the actual playable space, it may very well be the size of mines. But it's the perception of seeing a grid map that when you see half of it unplayable, it's well, wait a second, this map is really small. When in theory, I mean, it's probably about the size of mines in terms of play space, which, yes, does cater to more of the low-tier, mid-tier map sizes. But it doesn't mean that a whole map is kind of wasted because there's unplayable space there. It just, there's a very direct gameplay mindset that was kind of aimed for that design.
Right. Okay. So the game designer, the level designer approach is, you start with what sort of engagements do I want, and then you dress up that type of engagement, and that's what's led to this massive mountain on Hidden Village.
Yeah,
dumbed down.
I'll tell you, one of my challenges I have and I would say to the team as well for level design is making gameplay important in an open, empty space. Because sometimes if you think about some of our maps where it is just an open field, when you're designing a map, you feel obligated to put something there or change the terrain in some meaningful way. Do you put trees there? Do you plant a farm? Sometimes you got to take a step back and realize, actually, leaving it completely open, maybe a few bushes here and there, is the best course forward. Because that would be, it is part of game design to make sure that you have areas that are technically playable, but you're going to be completely exposed as a player, and it's essentially a death trap going there. And that's important to have in certain maps. But yeah, just trying to identify how to fill in those empty gaps of maps, it is a challenge. And like I said, sometimes leaving it open is probably the best solution in certain circumstances.
And I suppose now that you've got the traditional vision system as well as the true vision system, if the majority of maps were simply ported from PC, none of them were originally designed with true vision in mind. So
that's correct.
I suppose that's another level of challenging, because I remember when Cold War first came out, and especially when the light tanks first came out, I think it was, what was the first light line? I think was the Americans.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. And that was also before we had the concealment nerf. And I had I had such a blast on Prokhorovka. That was in a light tank with concealment that meant you were basically a 32-meter proxy spot. That map was incredible. Some of the spotting assist results I had in that map were just insane, and the videos I made at the time are now no longer relevant because, well, the map's not in the rotation anymore, and we've had the concealment nerf. So there are some. I mean, I'd like to see Prokhorovka back in Cold War, just because it was there and I liked it. But I guess further to that is, do you plan to have Cold War versions and World War II versions? Because when we had the True Vision test, El Haluf was that. I know that one, that was terrible, because from spawn, the first guy that loaded got a shot off straight across the valley.
Yeah.
So obviously, there are some maps that might just be a no-go, but I remember Highway. I remember that being. I enjoyed playing that with True Vision, and I've often wondered, what would happen if you just said for a weekend, right, here are all the maps that are in the game right now, Cold War, have at it. And
so that is something I am trying to schedule with the team, because I do see this request even on stream, that players would love to see certain maps, like Cold War aside, like even mines in tier 10. Now everyone has their opinions on it, and I will also say that the data shows that balance is usually off for a small map like mines in tier 10.
Yeah.
But I do agree that it would be a fun and compelling reason for some players to see these maps kind of shuffled around a little bit and have opportunity to try mines in tier 10, or bring Highway and Prokhorovka back into Cold War. I do see value in those. Highway, as one example, that one got called out because there was a lot of spawn sniping going on in that map. I tried to push back for more testing and figure out what we can do to keep it in Cold War. But ultimately, we decided to pull it and kind of put it on the back burner for now for reconsideration. For exactly the reason that you mentioned, of like having some sort of Cold War variant of it. And by that, like, we were thinking about some extra foliage, something that helps block those sight lines. That is something we kind of toyed around with for a little bit internally. And I believe we still have that task open. But as always, with priorities and our stack rank of tasks that we have on our plates, something like that continues to get kind of knocked down the road. But to your point, trying out just a shuffle weekend, bringing it back in, could very well just be like a nice addition to give the players once in a while.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, I do remember there being spawn sniping on Highway.
Yeah.
But I suppose the environment in which that map finds itself does lend itself to, well, a relatively easy fix, because you've already got trees on the map, and the map design might not need to change. Just add a couple more trees so that from spawn to spawn you can't physically see.
Right.
I mean, I don't know anything about the details of your day-to-day tasks, so for me to say easy fix, that might be slightly naive of me. But I mean, the contrast is El Haluf. I mean, it's a desert. It's not the environment in which you would find forest fauna.
Yeah, so like, how do you hide all the players at spawn?
Yeah, you can't just put a bunch of trees on each side, because you'd think, wait a second.
Well, to that point, when we do make maps available in both game modes, I'll try to cite an example as I'm talking here. Select maps, we will create a separate set of spawns that are appropriate for both game. Hellfire Pass is actually a perfect example.
Okay.
Cold War mode, standard battle, the spawns, mind you, there's actually two variants of standard battle for both World War II and Hellfire Pass, but bear with me here.
Yeah.
So yeah, one team that would spawn in the far northeast corner, and the team B would spawn in the far southwest corner. So for Cold War, we put the players as far away as possible from each other, because in those tanks and that mobility, they can actually get to each other within a relatively quick time.
Yes.
My metrics that we try to gauge what is appropriate for tanks at a spawn distance is, we usually like to try to, for first engagement, when a tank sees an enemy tank for the first time, roughly between like the 20 and maybe as late as 35 second within the first I'm sorry, let me back up. Within the first 20 to 35 seconds of match start is usually when we like to see players starting to see the enemy team. Any longer than that, then it becomes like a long build up of players trying to meet in the middle, and then it's just like a clump of everyone all there at once.
Okay.
So on World War II, we actually took the spawns and the bases and pushed them much further into the middle for that exact same metric, so players will start spotting the other team within the first 20 to 35 seconds of the game start. Mind you, I will point out, like, this map, Hellfire Pass being so large as it is, and we have already pulled out all 4 Cold War exclusive maps from World War II for the reason that they were simply too large, and most of the matches would average probably upwards of 12 to even like the 15-minute timeout. So we do try to avoid that, and by planting the spawns and the bases much closer, we encourage the battle to be relatively on a short average time frame. But that's up to the players to really determine, well, I'm a light tank, I'm going to go and YOLO to this corner and they'll never find me, sort of deal. So that's something like we do have to address and continue to kind of look at the data. Hellfire Pass may very well be a map that, over time, player sentiment might tell us, okay, this turns out not to be well liked in World War II, and it may have to be opted out and kept into Cold War until we can revisit a better solution.
Right. Okay. You mentioned timings there. I think, and something that I've heard this mentioned by certain PC CCs, community contributors, and you may have heard the comical misinterpretation of DPM to mean dollars per minute rather than damage per minute. Yeah. And I guess, we're on the subject of timings. Does Wargaming have a system of, we need X many number of games? Because you've mentioned maps were too big, games were taking too long. So for some players might say, well, it's quite nice to have a game that goes the full 15 minutes because that's the suspense. That's what I would like to see. I don't really like these 4-minute, 5-minute games.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where, I guess the tinfoil hats come out, and it's, oh well, Wargaming must be trying to get more games so that you spend more gold on your XP boosts, or you spend more gold on your silver boosts, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that has been said a lot. I've heard it said several times by people. And what's your response to that?
My perspective to this, myself personally, if I'm in a match, I love an average of like between a 5 to 7 minute match, as long as it was like meaningful and not just a rout, right? And the whole team just wiped out, and there was still like 15 guys left on the other team. Like, to me, it's more about the gameplay and having fun. However, I will admit I have the bias of having a dev account, so economy end of things doesn't quite pertain to me. But that's an unfair change, right?
Okay.
15-minute matches can be very exciting. I love it when they can come down to like the final 2v2 or 3v3, because that's the nail biter matches, and those are still very meaningful matches, whether it's about your earnings or not. It's sometimes even on a loss, as long as you had a great time and you made it all the way to the end and you got some well-placed shots or you outmaneuvered your enemy, like those are the moments that become very memorable. And those are things that I wish like every player can experience every match in and out, right?
Yeah.
To that end, the match times are kept relatively short and maxing out at 15 minutes because it is a game about having a single life. So for players that may die very early in the game or something, they can choose to stick around and stay in post-mortem, spectate their team or their friends, especially like platoon mates. If we were to like push the time limit to like a full 30-minute thing, and like you and I agreed on, like Battlefield, like I love the Battlefield games because those are long, drawn-out matches between 30 to 45 minutes, and because there's respawn, your matches can vary from so many different kind of gameplay opportunities. It's endless. It's essentially endless. But our game, in comparison, being a single life sort of game, drawing it out much longer would just lead to a lot of players not sticking around with their platoon mates, and absolutely not sticking it out to the end, because there's just not. They do want to just get out and get to the next battle and not care about what the results of that last match might be.
Right. So there's a balance between providing the players that survive with an engaging experience and also providing those that have died with their, basically giving them their tank back so they can carry on playing.
Yeah, and it's a difficult balance because in Cold War especially, with a lot of these tanks being as quick as they are, the engagements happen very quickly and often in a lot of the maps that, a lot of those could very well end in like 3 to 5 minute matches. And I think those are pointless matches personally. It's you queue it in and the match is over. Like probably, you could have had a long match that was a full 15, but at the same time there's other people squeezing in 5 matches when you have that one match. But that's difficult to balance sometimes with our map sizes when people can clump on top of each other so quickly. So that's also something we're trying to work on. Like, how do we increase the map sizes and keeping the engagements fun?
Yeah, I think one map that is, it's 100% guilty of boring games, especially in Era 3, is Duple Pass, and I've posted this in the feedback section to Wargaming, and basically what happens is at the start of each game, and I've said this on stream, essentially turn left and lemming train with the rest of the team and live, turn right and die, because no one turns right from either spawn. Northeast, southwest spawns. Now I know there is a I know there's a northwest and southeast spawn, and that game, when it's like that, that game's a bit more varied. But if it's northeast and southwest, those maps are both teams just circumnavigate each other, and it's a race to the cap. And that's a prime example of when I feel that queuing for that battle was a waste of time. Because especially when you're trying to 3-mark something and you see that happen, it's like, well, I've just lost a percent. Not because I died, not because anyone was playing badly. It's just, it was a bust. That game, with those spawns and those maps, it's just not a good mix.
I really appreciate that feedback. This is a side of things that we often don't get to see and engage sometimes from the player base and understand, like, oh, that meta of that map isn't fun. Sometimes we see the meta and we can look at the data and understand, okay, like, here it is. This is where players are going. Okay, it seems fairly balanced. That's good to know. But yeah, we also have to ask ourselves, like, is it fun? Are players actually getting anything out of it? And yeah, I would have to agree that sometimes this is a case in point of something where change has to be made. And it could very well be trying to shake up and change the spawns. That's the easiest case solution.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's like two different versions of the spawn arrangements. You know, we could very easily turn off that northeast and southwest one. If you're pointing out to me that only that spawn arrangement is not fun and the other one is more tolerable, like, I could put a task ticket in for that right now. But yeah, to that end, this is just something that wasn't even brought to my attention before. So I'd be happy to look into it a little bit further.
My honest take on it is there are maps where you think, this spawn is a maybe slight disadvantage, but Duple Pass, northeast, southwest spawns, that 99% of the time, every single game plays out exactly the same way.
Just goes that way.
Yeah. And
okay.
I think many a player would be happy if that one were to never be seen again. But I can also understand how it's difficult for you, though, because that is a very specific Cold War era 3, because every tank does like 70 kilometers an hour.
So in your perspective, this is only an Era 3 issue?
It's
just because how quickly they can just keep going around each other around the map?
It is very, very noticeable at Era 3, because Era 1, you've still got the heavies, the M103, the T34, the M46s, they're slow. Era 2, you've still got the FV, you've still got the Conqueror, you've still got the Chieftain. Everything else is quite quick. The light tanks are quick, the Leopards are quick, but you've still got something to sort of bring up the rear. But in Era 3, you've got Challenger 2s, you've got Merkavas, you've got 2A5s. Everything is going the same speed. And if all 15 tanks decide to take the 9 line, for example, from the northeast spawn, the game will be over in 2 minutes, because you'll have from the start, you'll have the whole team go south, turn right, and then you'll have 7 out of 3 sitting on the cap with smoke, so it can't be reset. And if it is reset, there's another 4 tanks there to keep the cap going, and the game's done in 2 minutes. And when you're trying to 3-mark your Challenger 2 and you need to do 14,000 damage combined, 15,000 damage, and all you've managed to do is 2,000, you think, wow, that sucked.
That's a hurt. Yeah.
So if that could be remedied, I think that would make many a player happy, very happy.
I will certainly get a ticket investigated on that. I actually pulled the map up myself to have a look at it. Right now, yeah, it is just a single arrangement for the spawns, if we're talking standard battle only.
Yeah.
That is something for Cold War we can certainly look into some sort of rearrangement there.
Sure. Well, that sounds good. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Like I get feedback requests like this a lot on a bunch of different maps, and we do take a look at some of these things. Sometimes they're negligible, or we don't get the full scope of things. And I hate to always just like say dismissing any sort of feedback request, but sometimes I also need to know like how big of a problem or how much is the community clamoring for change on certain aspects, and can we squeeze it in to the next milestone for change.
No, I can understand that, because that was a point that you guys made when there was that MOE problem. And I think the point was made that it's actually the minority of players that are even aware that marks exist. I know that when I started playing, my first marked tank was the 88 British tank destroyer.
Okay.
And at that point I thought, hang on a second, what's that thing on my barrel? What is that? And I had to Google it, mark on barrel, World of Tanks. Oh, it means that you're in the top, you're better than 65% of other players for that particular week. I thought, okay, so this is a thing now. I understand that not everybody is aware of it, and I've made the example with Duple Pass where it's particularly obvious when you're trying to 3-mark something. If you're not trying to 3-mark something, you might just go out in your T72 and think, oh, that happened. Next game. It might not even cross your mind. I can understand that my perspective is from a higher level of playing in the game, but you've got to accommodate every level of play in the game. So
exactly that.
I can understand it's not the easiest of tasks.
But again, always worth something, digging deeper into. Because at the same time, like yourself and many of the players that would tune into like said streams and look into it, you guys are the core players. If you're investing time to watch streams, read our articles, watch other streamers like yourself, etc., these are the players that want to learn. They want to get better and know how to progress more in this game. And they're the ones that want to learn like from us in terms of like what is success? What is these MOEs? Okay, I get it now, but now this my whole meta is kind of turned upside down of trying to understand how I do better for these MOEs. But Wargaming isn't catering because this map is hurting my MOE progress, etc., right?
Yes.
So like to the vocal minority, like you pointed out, that want MOE changes, they are certainly like people we want to keep in mind and do our best to make changes for it. As a matter of fact, I believe we have this change in, there is meant to be kind of a map, how do I put this? Almost like a reevaluation in terms of how the MOEs are doled out. This might have been actually part of the changes we tried to put in, but had to pull it back out. But like on a per map basis, your MOE progress was kind of reevaluated.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would imagine Duple Pass is also in that kind of reevaluation based on the information you're telling me. Okay. But at the same time, that is something we would also have to, reconsider in terms of map balance and changing it up a little bit with the spawners.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know that's it's as a player who maybe gets a little too carried away with the enthusiasm, the emotion. It is very easy to think, wargaming this, wargaming that. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it all, but I find as of right now, I'm finding this conversation very enlightening because it's providing a perspective that I didn't have before. So, no, it's good to hear your side of things on this because go on.
I was gonna, it's a very designing this game is very delicate because
Yes.
we can take this map, we can absolutely move those spawners in a completely different area, and hell, like we might actually do very well, and you might come back to me and say, hey, thank you, this is really working out for MOE progress and the gameplay is actually exciting. But like there'll be a whole different cohort of players that might come in now and say like this is unbalanced or unfair, that team gets advantage over here, Why didn't you guys think about this? And, from our perspective, like, we did, but then we also have to say, but we also considered this as a factor as to why we made this sort of decision. A lot of things kind of all get pooled in, and, admittingly, we miss things sometimes, and the players will help define where the problem and pain points are, and those come to light. And then we say, okay, well, let's take a look at the data. Let's tell us, do we actually think this is a problem to the players, or are they just pointing out a small flaw that is tolerable? And if not, what's the next step to making it either tolerable or a very appealing experience?
Yeah, I think from a community point of view, I'm working on improving this in myself, just generally, but the perspective you have is you have to account for everybody. You've got to account for the guy that's just downloaded the game and only has time for 10 games every weekend, and you've got to account for the guy that's playing 100 games 24/7, 365.
Right.
You've got the entire spectrum to account for, whereas an individual player like myself, I will come at it from my very unique point of view, and I think that's maybe where community feedback isn't all that helpful at times, because it's very narrow feedback rather than broad feedback, if that makes sense.
Narrow, not broad, that's fair, but also it is good feedback to get sometimes. Like, we like to know what it is the players are calling out on, and it is impossible to make everyone happy. Like,
of course,
this is true for any game. The best we can do is, for the new players, make sure that they feel at least successful, and there's a hook to keep them in the game, that there's a reason for them to, like, enjoy this game and keep coming back. And at the same time, for like yourself and veteran players, all players with very high skill, where do we marriage the two, that veteran players and new players can play together? And we've been constantly making strides of locking players into new players. When they join the game now, they are actually locked to PvE or co-op mode for X number of battles before we actually open the gates to them, just to give them a little bit more practice and not feel like outright obliterated by veteran players.
It's the seal close.
There's a lot to learn.
Yeah. Okay. No, I can appreciate that from you, from my side and your side. Mm-hmm. Jumping back just a little bit here to one specific map, and I know this is a question that probably a lot of people are asking. What's the deal with Airfield and Sunset Coast?
Ooh.
What's happened? Because I'm actually on. I will admit I haven't played World War II at all, really. But where's Airfield? Where's it gone?
I do hear this one a lot. Okay, now this is a good question, and I'll be very clear with you on this as well. So I told you about the whole stack rank of the maps that included, which ones were well balanced, well varied in gameplay, as well as highly requested or very well praised by the players. What I will say, despite the stack rank of, this has been determining our release cadence, Airfield was in fact the top requested map from players. Right. And it is like a very fun map. It's very well balanced. It's almost like a mirror image of itself, with some very differences.
Yeah.
Here's the development of why we got Sunset Coast and why hasn't Airfield come back. So I told you earlier, when I joined the level design team, I was part of the war stories and the mercenary mode big feature sets.
Yes.
And when we were starting to work on the Runaway Tiger chapter, there was I'm going to draw a blank on it, but we did have a story that was set in the jungle-like version of Airfield. And at the time, there were a lot of community requests that there were not like jungle maps in the game. The players wanted more, dense jungle-like environments in there. And so we were taking a look at what would be, we didn't have a new map on the docket, but mind you, I will tell you, we were working on the Cold War maps at the time, but they were still like 2 years out before release. So like Kalbong was also the big jungle map we were excited to release to players.
Yeah.
Ironically, at the time, a lot of people were asking for a jungle map. It's like, oh, you guys, we got something, but it's too early to say anything. But so we were trying to ask ourselves, how do we deliver on bringing a jungle map to the players? So we took a look at Airfield, and this was something players really wanted. Well, I'm sorry, was really well loved by players. And the idea came up, like, let's turn this into a jungle map. It's really well balanced. We'll make some adjustments here and there, and this will be the very close quarter, brawly jungle map with a lot of like just new foliage in there. At the time, I believe that we were going into the map reduction and re-arting everything up, where we didn't have variants of maps at the time. So what Airfield then became was Sunset Coast, and that was just what the map was. So moving forward, we released it, and I think it had some praise at the beginning. But yes, I do acknowledge, I'm not going to ignore the fact that players said, well, what happened to my Airfield? Where did it go? And, you know, we make decisions on a daily basis and try to plan out and scope out, you know, what will work well and like what will players like in the future. And we try some new creative ideas and think, you know, could this be a success? Could this be a hit? And this might be a case in point of something, well, in hindsight, maybe we shouldn't have gotten rid of the Airfield, because that is still a well-loved map, and the junglifying of it wasn't the right direction. But at the same time, we didn't want to abandon Sunset Coast at the same time. Now, I'll tell you right now, just for direct clarity, we are actively looking to bring back Airfield.
Hey.
World premiere. I won't give any specifics on dates. It is being worked on. We are testing it. And, you know, it's very clear to us that players want this one back. I didn't run this by the publishing team or production. That I might get a slap on the wrist for a small spoiler. But, you know, I'm more than happy to at least say that, you know, Airfield will be coming back to you guys. We will have to wait just a little while longer.
Will it work for Cold War?
We are testing that as well. What I will point out is I'm having fun with it in Cold War. Here's been my metrics for what maps work well in Cold War. Number one, when we initially launched Cold War, it was map sizes. We deemed that at launch, no maps smaller than 1.2 kilometers were deemed reasonable to work in Cold War. Mm-hmm. But over time, we kind of already bled through the number of maps that were that size, and we started testing around with the 1 kilometer squared maps and realized, actually, these do work out pretty well, depending on the arrangement of the map, of course. So Airfield is a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, so it's kind of on the minimum size to work in Cold War, but so far it has been working out. But as we move up an era, the faster the speeds, what we try to avoid is very quick engagement. I was talking to you about, like, you know, engagement times. The ideal engagement is somewhere between 20 and 35 seconds. Yeah. Era 3 was coming down to like 15 to 20 seconds. So a bit of a concern there, but there might be some wiggle room for us to work with it a little bit.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, something that I've noticed when playing Era 3 especially is having the speed available to you means that you can approach maps in a completely different way. Because if you take the World War II mindset, and we'll take Airfield because we're talking about it, you're in your super heavy. If you want a semi-predictable outcome, you're going to go to you're not going to go to the peak on the south side of the map, you know, where the actual coast is. You're going to go to the sort of cluster of outcroppy rocks that are sort of further to the north, not so far as the airstrip, the airfield, a little bit further south. I mean, people that play the map,
like top center, right?
Yeah, people will know what I'm talking about. So that's where you go. And I found, for me personally, the World War II mode created certain assumptions in my mind about how maps played. And what I'm finding with the mobility of Era 3, yes, I can take my M1A2 to that spot, but because I have the mobility, if I find that this spot isn't working for me, I don't just resign myself to, well, I'm stuck here, deal with it. It's, no, actually, I can look at the mini-map, I can see that the south side of the map or a different flank needs support, I can get there. Or I can think, I know there's a route through to the back of these guys, I wouldn't normally take it because my tank is too slow, but this one is quick enough, I can do it, I can get away with it. And it creates the opportunity for plays that people have never experienced before.
True.
And I guess in my mind I'm thinking the only way you will know is if, say, for a weekend you were to just go, right, here you go guys, here's Airfield, what happens when you guys play it? You know, have at it for 2 days and we'll review the data afterwards, because I kind of get excited by that sort of thing, you know, having the opportunity to try new things. Maybe that's just me, I don't know, but I would very much like that.
I like that you're pitching this to me, and it could be something we consider for like future map releases. You know, we do have Corellia coming soon. That's not a world premiere. We have announced that one before.
Okay.
What I can tell you right now is that one has not been deemed suitable for Cold War, for the exact same reason of like El Haluf, that you can see each other from the spawns.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that
more
became
trees
kind of
were added.
But I guess I'm not opposed to trying out some maps that are not like that. But if we even have some concerns and hesitation, to be like, all right, guys, we can communicate clearly and say, you know, internally we didn't feel too confident about this map. You know, launching with Era 3 available in rotation. But how about you guys, the players? Tell us, what do you think? What do you feel? You know, that's a different development mentality, because you know, there is pressure on us. We are the major stakeholders here in the studio, that we have to take ownership and responsibility to say, you know, we've done the research, the work, and the data, and we believe and strongly believe that this map is catering and will only work well for World War II mode, right?
Yeah.
I will say, like, we're growing with our kind of new leadership roles. Like myself in my lead position that I'm in, I'm still learning, I'm still adapting, and part of like you and I having this podcast is, you know, at least my attempt and our studio's attempt to be a little bit more clear and transparent with the community, be open to new ideas, and you know, changing our developments a little bit. That, you know, listening to you guys and understanding, not only as a developer but also as a player ourselves, like what is it that we can try a little bit better, and you guys have ideas that sometimes we don't even consider.
Yeah, this is probably never going to happen, but I have had the thought of something completely ridiculous, like put Ensk into Era 3, just for the lull factor. You know, I want to see what happens when you have 15 Era 3 tanks in just maybe an April Fool's thing, I don't know, but you know, I guess there is a part of me that's just interested in seeing, well, what would happen, you know,
Right.
Stick it in there and let's just find out what happens. How does it go? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't work, fine, but if it does, hey, we've gained something.
Funny story to that end, and specifically talking about Ensk. This is probably back in 2017 or 2018. We used to have a player gathering at a local Chicago park called Cantigny.
Yeah.
It's a very cool like military museum park. They actually have a lot of tanks like on site there as well. And we did a panel session with several of us on design and UI engineering departments, all available. We did presentations and did some Q&A with a lot of players who came to also visit us in person. And this will always be ingrained in my mind. Mind you, at this time I was a junior designer, and I'm still learning like a lot of the ropes and being a better level designer at this point. But Ensk at the time was available in rotation, and it was also all the way available in up to tier 10. And someone in the audience, asked me, I was the only rep for level design here, by the way, and I will remind you, junior level design.
Yeah.
I was asked, Ensk, tier 10, why? Just flat out. I didn't have a great answer at the time, I'll be quite honest, because with so many maps to juggle through and understand which ones are balanced, which ones which ones fit well and work well in different tiers, I was like, I'll take a look. That's really all I can answer right now. I get it. It is a smaller map, and the vision ranges just make you guys kind of see each other and clump up immediately.
Yeah.
All I can really say is that's just an example that we'll take a look and address in the future. And sure enough, that future was pulling Ensk out from tier 10.
Yeah. Get rid of that.
But yeah, in terms of, what I will say right now, I do not have confidence Ensk will play well in Cold War at all.
No, I don't either.
Yeah. I leave it to you and the players if and when, I'm not going to hint that it's coming out, but if and when it releases, take it into custom games and, let us know what you guys think.
Yeah. Because
here's the opposite reaction if we do put it into Cold War random battle rotation. The torches and pitchforks will be coming after us.
Yeah, I can imagine I've made the point about Duple Pass, and I'm probably just shooting myself in the foot with that one. But yeah, no, it's just having those sort of outside the box, out there thoughts, ideas. Obviously, not every single one of them's viable. Not every single one of them's worth noting. But my mind does wander sometimes, and I think about stuff like this, and I do think, well, what if that were to happen? What would be the result? What would it be like? And on that specific point, we're sort of straying away now from level design and maps, but I have for a long time now wanted the World War II tech tree to just be ported straight into Cold War.
So it's all connected in one.
Yeah, because I miss playing the Tiger 1, I miss playing the Panther, I miss playing the T69 American medium. But for me, I'm a Cold War player.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So
I came from the perspective that you're asking that the tech trees be merged in terms of just accessibility of going between them. You're asking that the actual tanks play in a Cold War-like mode.
Yeah, World War II tech tree with True Vision.
Yeah, basically just with True Vision on.
Yeah.
That's a hot topic. I mean, what I'll tell you right now is we'll never just turn on True Vision for World War II mode.
Of course,
maybe for like a select event weekend thing, but it will never be a permanent in rotation mode.
No.
And to that same note, we also can't have a separate matchmaker that is strictly World War II True Vision either, because we are really dividing up our matchmaker and player bases. Cold War being 3 separate matchmakers, and World War II, between the various tiers.
Oh, I see where you're coming from, yeah.
Yeah. So what would end up really happening is longer queue times and very much more bot matches. And we did our best, and actually our queue times are really good looking right now. I don't have the data in front of me, but I think average 2 seconds for an instant queue, and at latest 2 minutes, and that's a worst case scenario. But typically when players, our data shows players that are stuck in queue longer, or are playing in matches that they end up dying really quickly and wait again into a long queue, would typically end their sessions a lot sooner, as opposed to players that go through quick queues and have longer matches and can play more battles in between them, between all their sessions.
Right.
So yeah, trying to keep everyone engaged is very important, and a reason for them to come back. Plus, always fighting against bots. great for new players, or great for like if players want to come in and just get a warm up round before they put their mitts against other players in PvP mode. But otherwise, I can't stress it enough that creating another matchmaker would make that a difficult argument to make.
Right. Yeah, okay, I can see that point. Because I love the game. Obviously, I'm invested heavily in it. But there are times where I do think to myself, I do miss playing the more historical vehicles.
I'll put a note. Here's what I will do, because there could be value in here. This is going to light a fire under my ass. I'll say that much though, because I'm not opposed to an idea, very similar to like the map shuffle, like a weekends or event thing.
Yeah.
We've done this in the past as well. Where in the before Cold War, you were probably part of this. We did actually true vision tests in World War II mode.
Yes.
Unanimously, I will tell you, the data has shown from players that this was not a thing they wanted. They were, I think there was even like risks of like, or threats of players boycotting the game if we did this, etc. So it's certainly not a direction we can move in. But again, maybe as like an event mode, a weekend thing, as long as it's very clear that True Vision is on, come join in World War II mode. Maybe True Vision is off in Cold War. I'm not saying that's something we do. That's just more of a joke and
yeah, well,
to toy around with. But we have flexibility to consider these things if there is actual like community demand.
Yeah, I know at right now, I think the split between World War II and Cold War is something like 30-70, I think. And
that's about accurate to my understanding as well.
And it was down at 20-80 at one point. Now it's 30-70. So it is increasing. So I can understand that there isn't the demand there as much as there is in the World War II mode. I know there's a lot of the player base is World War II, which is absolutely fine. I often just find myself sitting in the garage thinking, I've got all these other tanks that I don't,
getting dust on them.
Yeah, they're just collecting dust because the vision mechanic that I enjoy playing, which is it's a very common vision mechanic across the gaming industry. I like that, and I'd love it if I could just take my Tiger 1 out into a True Vision game. Or my IS-3, all these historical tanks that I have, but I'm not playing, and I don't know if the an IS-3 would ever make it into the post-war period era 1. I don't know what plans there are for future premiums or future tech trees, but yeah, I'm probably not just speaking for myself, but
I'm sure you're not alone.
Yeah,
it's really in contrast in comparison to what I know will be very adversarial if we do ever push True Vision into World War II. To that end, yeah.
I definitely don't recommend that. Definitely not that.
But I will say I really appreciate like just bringing it to attention, because maybe we run a poll, we get community to suggest like, do we want to run it? As long as we're very clear, and I'll tell you this as well, like it'll never be a permanent thing into the game. Some sort of event tie-in, like maybe it is like a split matchmaker for even like a weekend, right? That might be something we can afford. Right now, I'm just kind of spitballing ideas here, but there's no true stakes put into the ground on these.
Yeah.
But at the very least, what I can do is start the conversations here, because honestly, it's a low-hanging fruit in terms of just switching a flag that says True Vision on. So it wouldn't be too difficult in terms of like implementation. We just have to ask ourselves, what does it take in terms of messaging to the players, and how do we actually want to handle it in the interface of the game?
Well, I would, if it were me, I would say, look, I don't want to rock the boat with the World War II players. I respect that I respect that people like that mode. I respect that people think it's the better mode. You know, fine, everyone has their opinion, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you know, I've poked the hornet's nest a few times by titling videos controversially, but you know, you do what you do. But I would almost, if it's possible, I'd address the Cold War community and say, look, would you guys be interested in, for one weekend, just having access to the World War II tech tree?
Mm-hmm.
You know, would you like that? I know I would. Artillery, I don't know how that would work. You might not just have artillery, but yeah, just sort of spitballing an idea.
Right. The good news about artillery, we actually already have a system in place when we have been testing True Vision in World War II. Our arty does not get True Vision, even despite if we turn it on.
Yes, I remember that. I remember when True Vision was being tested, there was a glitch that you could get True Vision with artillery, and I remember that.
Oh, that's right.
That got patched very quickly.
Whoopsie.
Yes, whoops. But no, I think that would be a constructive route for the game. In my opinion, that would be a constructive route. And if it's possible, I would very much like to see that personally.
Hey, like I said, the least I will start with is some conversations, and I think we could very much put it to a poll, see if there is some interest in it, and you know, if we can get past that gate, it would be a matter of, okay, let's try it out live, and then we see what the players think about that, and that will also be telling, like, was this a success? Was it not so well received? And then how do we want to proceed?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think for now, I think the last thing I will, the last point I'd like to bring up is around the time that True Vision was being tested, the idea of 3-man platoons was also tested. And what ended up happening was we went from 5-man platoons to 3 in what felt like it was an overnight change after one obscure test. And I think for me, the biggest change to the game that's had a very negative impact for me personally has been the change from 5 to 3. And I know I've raised this question and had sort of general conversation with various people, but I've never had the opportunity to ask someone like yourself from Wargaming.
Sure.
I understand that the reason for having 3-man platoon was to cut down on matchmaker fails. And if having 3-man platoons has improved the chances of platoons getting into games, then fine, I understand that. But what I'm finding is that I never thought there was a problem to begin with. You guys made some very good changes to the way 5-man platoons could roll out. You know, you stopped the 5 vanguards going out together and just ruffle stomping everybody, which is, you know, fair enough, that needed to happen. But what I'm not quite clear on is 3-man platoons down from 5 to me felt like a solution to a problem that was never there.
So in your perspective, though, you don't think there was ever any balance concerns of say having like a team of three 5-man platoons that somehow got put together, and none on the other side, or maybe 1 or 2 5-man platoons, or even individual ones.
That, from memory, I mean, it's been a long time now, obviously, but from memory, I never really had a problem with that, because if I was in one of those 5-man platoons, chances are I was there with my friends just having a laugh. And yes, once in a blue moon, I would roll out with 5 unicums and we would storm every single game, you know. But that was the exception of exceptions, you know. 99% of the time when I observed 5-man platoons, it was just five friends having a good time. And I think the biggest negative impact for me has been World of Tanks was my way of socializing with my friends, and the game has told me you can't do that anymore. And that's like, whoa, I'd love to play with my friends, but I can't because
we restrict that.
Because you've restricted it. And it's like, I had a conversation recently with a couple of guys, and we were saying, oh, wouldn't it be great if we, get the old band back together? Oh, wait, we can't, because we're stuck to 3. And I understand, I have had this conversation with a couple of people who are, they're very good players, and they've said, oh no, it was unbalanced, it wasn't fair, it wasn't fun, it was unbalanced. But again, in my experience, it was just, the majority of 5-man platoons on a weeknight were 5 guys who were 2 beers in, just having a laugh,
Right.
And it was, that to me was one of the highest appeals of the game, was the social. And I do feel it's lost that.
2 things. One, 100% agree with you, because that is the same reason I play some other multiplayer games. Bounce them back to Battlefield. I believe that was a 4-player squad. Maybe they have 5. I can't recall.
4 was 5. Yeah.
It was 5. Yeah.
Battlefield 4 was.
Competitive multiplayer games with built-in social pillars like that, and being able to matchmake together with your friends, very important element to myself and many other of my other peers in the company. The second thing is, we've been on 3-man platoons now for I think like 2 years.
Yeah.
With a lot of the advancements and changes made to the matchmaker now, with like the pairs matchmaking and the better distribution of like tanks and tank types between both teams, as well as number of platoons. There might be, again, don't take me for granted here. Like, I'm not putting any stakes in the ground right now. This is another example of conversations I can start in the company and start re-looking into to see, what were the original issues of 5-man platoons, and will they still be valid with much of the improvements and changes we made nowadays? Because 100% agreed. Like, I would love to come back and join with a bunch of friends. We would do 5-man TOG platoons.
Yes.
We were we were slow. We felt useless, but when the team annihilated the rest of our team and came to us, we were just like a brick wall. But like, anyway, I like the idea personally. Whether or not it is something we can implement, I have to run it through a lot of meetings and discussions of like, is this actually the right direction here? Because I will anticipate we get those complaints from like, solo players or other people that don't generally platoon, or maybe only like have a couple platoon. They will feel a little bit outmatched when there's a 5-man platoon on the other side. Because we also get a lot of complaints that clan members are queuing in at the same time and will be on the same team. And I mean, there's no doubt about it. Team communication, it will often lead to success in a game. I mean, coordination is very important for a game such as World of Tanks. So increasing that platoon size, that's that much more communication. So balance would play a factor into it. But rolling back again, with the advancements that we made in the pairs matchmaker, we could better probably queue in 5-man platoons on either team. But to your point, this likely would be an increase in the queue times. So we just have to ask ourselves, like, what is the goal? And, do we allow for higher queue times along with these, larger quantity platoons? Or is there like a middle ground? Maybe even 4-man platoons could be a consideration.
Well, you say that, 5-man platoons, higher queue times. And in all honesty, I would rather Wargaming permit... how can I say this? I would... It's almost coming back to like the sandbox analogy. I would rather you let me do it and balance my sandbox experience rather than just saying no. You know, if I have to put up with longer queue times, if I have to have an extra 30 seconds on my battle queue to get into a game with 5 of my friends, or so it's not 5, 4 for myself included, the 5, I'm happy to do that because I'm playing the game for the game experience, but I'm also there for the social experience. And if I have to wait 30 seconds, that's just 30 seconds more banter with my friends. That's
fair point.
That's no skin off my teeth at all. And I when we had 5-man platoons, I don't have a single memory of ever thinking this needs balancing. Well, sorry, there were balancing things that were introduced and were fair, but I never thought that the queue times were too long. I never thought, oh, they've got a 5-man platoon, we've lost. Because
for sure,
no one's got a crystal ball. I know some players like to look at the enemy team and go, oh, we've lost this. I mean, I've done it. I've gone, oh, look at this Era 2 game. They've got 4 FV, 4 211s. We've lost. And then the end of the game, and we've won. No one's got a crystal ball, so I don't think we should say no to stuff outright. Say yes to it and balance it, because of course, like I said, 5 Vanguards was too much at tier 8. Even in a tier 10 game, that was too much. But if it's like you can have 1 light tank, 2 mediums, 2 heavies, I will sacrifice a game in my whatever tank I wanted to play. If 2 of my friends want to take out heavies, I'll say, yeah, sure, I'll take out a light, sure, I'll take out a medium, because I'm there for the social experience with my buddies.
For sure.
And I will acknowledge that, yeah, I'm sure there are 5-man platoons out there, or there were, that were specifically there to just have absolutely outrageous games, and I'm sure there were, but I would put money on it not being the majority of cases. I would put money on saying that the majority of 5-man platoons were just people having a good time, and that to me is what the game provided. The game provided an element that allowed me to have a really good time. And 3-man platoons is still good. It's better than none, but I do feel the game has lost a side of appeal that it used to have with that.
No complaints here. I am in agreement with you. To that end, again, it's not like a stake in the ground that we will do it. There was one other thing that you pointed out in terms of limiting the kind of tanks into the platoon. And this reminded me as to one of the other reasons I think we took this direction was the bug farm this generated. There's always been so many exceptions or workarounds of players coming in with more arties in the platoon, or a full team of light tanks or something. Yeah. This became very problematic, and so to help mitigate that workload and the number of issues that this would constantly generate for both the game itself and for us on the development side to address. Because mind you, anytime we deal with bugs, even with the release of the Waken season last week, there's usually another week or 2 that we are constantly monitoring and getting live reported issues that we have to tackle, and those issues are taking away resource time for us to deliver on our next big milestone. So, working off anecdotally here, the 5-man platoons, I believe there was just a lot of issues like that kind of cropping up, and we were always kind of trapped in trying to address any changes that we make to it. And even when we make matchmaker changes, it breaks something again every milestone for the platoon. So we come back to it okay, we got to refix this again because somehow players found out how to get a 5-man arty platoon going. To that end, though, this is not a deal breaker. This isn't me just burying it into the ground and saying, no, we will not do 5-man platoons. This is me saying I agree that this is a very strong social element to the game, and certainly worth revisiting conversation and discussion.
If that could be revisited, I would be very, very grateful.
That is the very least I can do for you, sir.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's about me done with everything I had to cover with you tonight.
Wonderful. I mean, it's been I can't believe, God, we started almost 2 hours ago, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a good conversation, and I think more conversations like this one with the people who have, the folks that work where the rubber meets the road, where the real work is done. I think this provides insight that we don't normally get. I don't think there's ever been a conversation quite as frank and open as this one ever between a player and a developer from Wargaming.
So I briefly mentioned this, and yeah, we are trying to make strides of being better listeners to the players. And me personally, you caught me. I've been lurking on your streams. I check out people's YouTube channels. I'll give a shout out, like Slap a Fish. I've checked out his content. Titan Eclipse, Sinister. I like to see what players are thinking, what they are saying. I come in as a player myself with my own perspective and experience, but I am by no means a pro player at this game. I am good, but if you want to go into like a 1v1 match, I'm already schooled, quite honestly. And so, we as developers have to constantly learn and adapt. And it's an opportunity for me to, watch people, what they are doing, and see how their play styles and what they are talking about, that we realize, you know what? I didn't think about this before. Like, maybe we should look into Duple Pass and revisiting the meta of how that map kind of plays out. Because again, we just have that kind of internal conversation, and then our community team will be the ones that, me on the design side and development, I don't have the time, and much of my other team members do, like, dig into like the Discord and the forums and social media to see what generally players are talking about. So it's the community team that, they do a great job, and they dig into it very much, and will send things and requests our way. But at the same time, I think this is also important, and also why, like, I've stepped up to join the weekly stream every Friday.
Yeah.
There might be some Fridays I have to dip out, but it's just trying to be more clear with the players, providing that transparency of what it is on the development side of things, that I can give straight up answers, because I've had certain very hands-on experiences and discussions with that I can provide, those answers like straight to you guys.
Yes.
So I'm enjoying this. This is very new, but I'll try my best to be, kind of available. At the same time, I'll also admit, I think I may be opening the floodgates now that, I one-on-one connected with you. It can make wonder, what's the next request.
Well, we'll just have to see what happens. But I have thought that if we get the opportunity to do this again, it would be interesting to have a third, another CC join, just to get yet another perspective on it, because I know there are some CCs who are, some dislike Cold War. I love Cold War, so it would be interesting to have, yourself and then, for and against on our side. So
for sure, yeah.
I think
very
we've
topics.
we've got a lot of we've got a lot that we could cover, but for now, you're right. We've been talking for almost 2 hours, so
my water bottle is out. So
yeah, mine too. Yes. Well, I really, really do appreciate your time, and I thought, I'd bite the bullet and I'd say, you know what, I'll just try asking, could I talk to Bam at Wargaming? And the answer was yes. So, I took the dive and it paid off. So.
Absolutely, man. Like I had a lot of fun, and I'm not opposed to doing this again.
That's what I like to hear. That is what I like to hear. So, well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for talking to me, and we'll catch up again. Hopefully, not too far in the future.
Absolutely, you are very welcome.
Thank you very much, man.